I like to think my original Young Justice retrospective served as a good summation of the show as a whole. I would hardly call Young Justice formulaic, but it does have very consistent themes and motifs, which makes it relatively easy to broadly characterize what all the episodes are building to. Young Justice may be full of gritty scenes and noir-esque writing, but it remains, at its core, a thoroughly optimistic series. It's a story in which characters are constantly pushed to move out of their insecurities and to trust others, and are consistently rewarded for doing so. But there is one episode in the first season that I couldn't put in my retrospective. It just wouldn't fit. It breaks every rule that every other episode in the season establishes. It displays a world in which none of this optimism amounts to anything, in which there really is no hope of anything ever getting better. The writers created an atmosphere here that I can only describe as eerie. The episode I'm talking about is, of course, episode 16, Failsafe. Right in the first scene, Failsafe establishes how tonally different it will be from the rest of the show. The entire Justice League dies within 3 minutes of the episode starting, and there's a real brutality to how swiftly and decisively they all fall. But Failsafe is also playing with a disconnect that the audience should feel right away. We all know that none of these characters can really be dead. The show wouldn't just throw away the developing mystery the last 15 episodes had been setting up. This knowledge is only compounded by the lack of reaction the team displays at their demise. These characters feel just as out of sync with this apocalypse story as the viewer does. Initially, at least. Because while the opening minutes of this episode feel shocking, it's at Artemis' death where the episode veers into terror. There is no tonal divide from here on out. All the deaths now exercise their full weight onto these characters, and the vividness of their reactions is one of the most hauntingly memorable aspects of the episode. Rarely will you see superhero media make death feel quite this real and permanent, and yet the viewer still knows, now more than ever, that none of these can actually be permanent. There's just no way they would actually kill off Artemis. Her supposed death has a gravity to it, though, that suggests otherwise. It's just when the tone is feeling its most deliberate and consistent, when the tonal dissonance is hitting the viewer the hardest. And it's more than just the deaths. There's a broader feeling of hopelessness lingering throughout the team's mission. Every encounter, they seem to lose more and more. The invading army only appears more threatening as the episode goes on. And while opportunities for hope are sometimes presented to them, these always feel more like fool's hope than anything else. Of course, we know in retrospect why this world is so bleak. It's a train for failure exercise. The hopelessness is by design. But the cold description Batman offers it doesn't do justice to the visceral experiences we see the team have in there. It's a pretty common motif throughout Young Justice that there are some things these kids intuit better than their adult counterparts. That a world this hopeless would lead to emotional scarring, regardless of what they knew to be real, really should have been more obvious to the Leaguers. I mean, 8-year-old me knew it wasn't real, and I still got nightmares from it. Other episodes in this season can have high stakes, but there's always a sense of assurance that the good guys will win in the end. Even if the sidekicks get bested, the Justice League always stands in the background as a paragon of security. Despite the constant insistence of the light that everything is going according to plan, we know that things are actually always going according to the writer's plans, who will give the good guys the victory they deserve in the end. But none of that is guaranteed in Failsafe. Nothing is going to plan. Things are falling apart with no appearance that they'll ever be repaired. This apocalypse they're in is hell. That's really the only word I can use to accurately describe it. And it's in this hellish experience where the bulk of the drama of Failsafe takes place. How these characters respond to this world is by far the most engrossing aspect of this episode. McGann's overpowering display of grief and sadness is the most striking, but Connor's complete lack of any emotion is just as interesting. Calder's sacrificial instincts offer just a tinge of inspiration, but that's almost immediately overshadowed by the cold and calculative leadership of Robin. Seeing this 13-year-old kid knowingly send his own teammates to their death, manipulate others, and lie on instinct, all for the sake of an already grim mission, is something that just sticks with you. As does one of the last scenes of the episode. Two teenagers charging into a battle they know they'll lose simply because they're out of other options. But it's the person Robin's charging with that interests me the most in Failsafe. The teleportation hypothesis is seemingly introduced as a red herring to the question of how all these characters are still alive, but it never really functions like a proper one. Most characters are skeptical about it right away, and it never feels like the episode is progressing towards that kind of ending. But Wally entirely and almost manically buying into the theory completely justifies its inclusion. His denial is just so brutal to watch unfold. Seeing him desperately cling on to hope in a world that will not allow it. His acting and animation just sell this desperation so well. He always looks and talks like he probably knows that he's believing nonsense, but would prefer that to facing the truth. This all coming from the character who claims to be the most rationalistic and empirical of the group.
Everything can be explained by science.
Is also bitterly ironic. One can guess that Wally reacts this way due to his comparatively happy upbringing. This is a uniquely traumatic experience for all these characters, but trauma is a word that all of them are at least familiar with. All of them except Wally. The episode continues getting grimmer and grimmer. The reveal of the second mothership coming down immediately after the first one falls, along with McGann's reaction, is certainly evocative. But it's something that feels like a given at this point with how the episode has progressed. It's the scene after that which provides the episode with, if not its most surprising, at least its most relieving twist. Wally turned out to be right. He was right, but not at all in the way he expected to be. Dream twists are notorious for being anticlimactic, but it's a testament to this show's writing that this ending still has a weight to it. In fact, Failsafe ends up being one of the most impactful episodes of Season 1, even if it has zero relevance to the overarching plot. The story here is still hugely important for kickstarting these characters towards their arc's conclusion. And it's in this fact that Failsafe goes from being disturbing to being, in a beautifully ironic way, kind of inspirational. Let me explain. Again, Failsafe serves as the antithesis to everything this show has been setting up. All the other episodes display a world of real optimism, where there is genuine hope that insecurities can be overcome, the past can be moved on from, and that the future is bright. Failsafe, for about 20 minutes, displays a world in which none of that holds true. But it's precisely this experience of a hopeless world that fuels the hope of the season's closing act. The experiences they all had in there directly led to them realizing what their insecurities were, who they wanted to be, and who they didn't want to be. It put Dick on the path towards moving past Batman's shadow. It helped Artemis and McGann confront their identity, and Wally and Connor at least began to recognize where they needed to grow. Hopelessness, it turns out, only existed to give them hope. Of course, it's not an easy path from here. All of them actually need to go to therapy. But it's still a path they're the better for walking. For how truly terrifying this episode is, it synthesizes with the rest of the season to tell a beautiful story. These characters walked through hell and came out the other side.